Hello, everybody. It's Mrs. Pound, and I'm back with another chapter, chapter 1.3 on taxonomy from Purposeful Design Life Science. And today's video is going to be about section 131, the history of taxonomy. So our objectives today are going to be to summarize the history of taxonomy, explain the use of binomial nomenclature, and describe how the science of taxonomy supports God's unlimited power and creativity. Now, you're probably wondering what taxonomy is. And taxonomy is the scientific classification of organisms. So, why would we classify organisms? Well, if we take a look at this tray I have underneath of silverware, um, we classify things all the time. We like to put them into orderly categories to better study them and understand them. So, we use taxonomy really to better understand God's creation because He made a very diverse creation. As you can see, there are many interesting and wonderful creatures God has created, both on land and in our oceans. And we have identified about 1.4 million different creatures types of creatures God has created, but scientists believe that there are about 10 million. So we've just scratched the surface on that. So why would we study taxonomy? Its usefulness. It allows scientists worldwide to share information about species. We need to make sure we're talking about the same thing, okay? So we have to be on the same page there. It also helps scientists find ways to control pests, improve crops, and fight diseases if we can classify and group things together. It helps people understand how organisms relate to one another in ecosystems. And it shows God's amazing power and creativity by showing the variety of organisms God created and how different they are from each other, like these organisms that are found on the coral reef in the background here. So, the history of classification started really with Aristotle, probably even sooner. I mean, really, right off the bat, from when God told Adam to name all of the creatures, right? But with Aristotle, a Greek philosopher, he created what is called the ladder of life. And he tried to rank the importance of living things. So it wasn't based on their characteristics, it was based on their importance, according to him. He placed non living things actually on the lowest rung. So there were non living things, and then he gradually placed them in increasing importance going on up the ladder. Now, after Aristotle created his ladder of life, some philosophers got together later and created the great chain of being. Again, they ranked the importance of living things, and they actually included spiritual beings. They had non living things at the bottom, they actually had spiritual beings at the top of the chain. And one important thing about this was they did recognize that all living things are important because God said his creation was good. So this was a more biblically based classification system. But it also stated that humans are made in his image and are stewards of his creation. So it did put an importance on humans based on scripture. And then there's Carolus Linnaeus. He is the man who created the classification system we use today. And his system uses what's called binomial nomenclature. This is a two-part scientific naming system. There's the genus, which is capitalized, and the species, which is lowercase. It's in Latin. An example is Acer rubrum. So every living every different species has a scientific name that has two parts, a genus and a species. Now, Acer rubrum, this is a red maple. Acer meaning maple, rubrum meaning red. So everything has this two-part name, and it helps clarify things because a lot of times in different areas, The same species will have two different common names, but with everything having just the same scientific name, it clarifies things so that you don't think you have two different species, even though it has two different common names. And then finally, Linnaeus came up with the idea of kingdoms. And he actually, when he was devising this, he did believe that he was classifying God's creatures. So it has become much more secular now as far as the scientific naming is concerned. But Linnaeus did believe in God, and he was trying to classify God's creation in an orderly manner, following really uh, biblical principles. Okay, so the kingdoms, at first there were only two until the development of microscopes. So the kingdoms that Linnaeus set up were plants and animals. Then there were five kingdoms that we added: animals, plants, fungi, bacteria, and protists. Fungi, especially mushrooms, were added. Things were added because of the use of microscopes. Okay, microscopes. Before microscopes, the protists were not be you weren't able to see those. Today, there are actually three domains. There are bacteria, archaea, eukarya, which contains the protists, fungi, plantae, and animalia. Um, so protista, it would be the kingdom. So the classic kingdoms we are used to are mainly in eukarya, although there's four, and bacteria and archaea. That kingdom for just bacteria has been broken up from the old classification system. And we'll get into this further, but this is just a quick intro today. So, our objectives are to summarize the history of taxonomy, explain the use of binomial nomenclature, and describe how the science of taxonomy supports God's unlimited power and creativity. So, don't forget your 5 questions, and I'll be back with, oh, and also remember to answer your questions at the end of this video. And I'll be back with another video for you.